In this entry in the vlog, we are going to work to answer the question, what is a thesis anyway? Because in process assignment number 3, in part of it, you're going to have to draft the introduction to your essay for writing project number 3, it's important for us to have a shared sense of what we mean by a thesis or a thesis statement. So broadly, a thesis is an argument. But again, even with the word argument, we may have different ideas running through our minds of what we mean by argument, right? So we want to ask, maybe what is the purpose of an argument? That'll help us get a shared sense of what we mean when we say argument. Now, when I ask what is the purpose of an argument, many of you may think, well, the purpose is to win. And I would agree with you if we're talking about making dinner plans with your friends. Maybe you have somewhere you want to go and they have somewhere else, and so someone's going to win that argument. Legal trials have a kind of a winner and a loser, so there is winning is kind of the goal or objective there, as well as political debates are arguments, right? And again, the debate may have a winner or loser, but also elections do as well. So sure, some arguments, the goal is to win. You might also say, though, well, when I'm thinking of arguments in essays, I'm thinking of persuasion or convincing a reader of a position. And I think that holds as well. That's connected to Aristotelian appeals, which you might know as the rhetorical triangle, which includes pathos, ethos, and logos. And pathos is emotional appeals that you make to the emotions and the values of your audience. Ethos is tied in with appeals of authority and credibility and character, so who the writer is, who they appear to be to their reader, and appealing to them that way in terms of their credibility. And logos are logical appeals, so the logical structure of an argument as well as the facts and data and information that's used to develop that argument. So often, an argument can be an attempt to persuade readers. The persuasive essay is, of course, a pretty common genre of argument in this fashion. But I'd like us to think a little bit more about the academic conversation and what it involves. And if writing is entering into a conversation, or academic writing is entering into a conversation, then maybe its goal is also to understand a subject, and its argument is even about understanding and developing a new way of understanding that subject, right? Where you share information and perspectives in order to make an informed political, professional, or personal choice, or even academic choice, right? I think this is the closest purpose to most academic writing, again, to add to a conversation, to increase knowledge, to discover new ideas. And so that's where we're really going to focus our sense of what an argument is for this vlog entry, and also for writing project number 3 and the process assignment as well. So, what is it that makes a statement arguable? Well, let's look at some examples here. A statement that is arguable should seek to convince readers of, at the very least, the validity of your perspective and point, and sometimes more than that. So even if you're not writing a persuasive essay, but you're writing an essay that examines something and gets at kind of details and complexities, you at least want to convince your reader of the validity of your interpretation of things, right? A literary essay, let's say, will convince readers of an interpretive point that, let's say, the writer's making. It should also address a problem that has no obvious or absolute solution or answer. Again, this really ties back to Savini, where when you're looking for fruitful questions, they aren't ones that can just be answered with definitive information, right, or an absolute solution. But you're looking at complexities, you're looking at perspectives, you're looking at different ways of possibly thinking about the subject. And it should also present a position that readers can have varying perspectives on. So let's look at an example here. Some of the most popular video games are MMOs. MMO stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Game, right? This is a statement, but it's not really an arguable one. Again, you could just show the data that says, hey, look, some of the most popular games here are MMOs. And that would kind of do the work for you almost. You don't have to look at different perspectives and look at naysayers and different ways of thinking. However, MMOs can effectively develop strong team building and problem solving strategies is more interpretive, it's more open, it can have varying perspectives. It doesn't have one answer that's possible within that debate, right? So that second one is more arguable than the first. So once we have an arguable statement, we really want to move to what's more of an arguable thesis. I would argue that the previous one is a pretty solid start towards that, but let's think about how we move from an arguable statement to an argumentative thesis. So here's an example. Pesticides should be banned. Okay, that is an arguable statement, right? So you can have different perspectives on it. You can have different ways of thinking about it. But it doesn't quite get at the complexity of the essay that will follow. It doesn't quite highlight the areas that it will kind of investigate, right? So it can do more to become what we might call a thesis that does that forecasting. So again, this is arguable, but it doesn't give us much to develop. So adding reasons or additional context might help do that. Okay, so let's look at the next version. Pesticides endanger the lives of farm workers. Okay, here this gives us some reasons, right? It endangers the lives of farm workers. So we can see that essay might now talk about farm workers as stakeholders, and it's really going to connect to issues of health or livelihood, right? And so we see kind of where that essay is going in terms of its direction, in terms of its content and focus. So when you connect your reasons in your claim, that starts to develop that argumentative thesis. Because they endanger the lives of farm workers, pesticides should be banned. Okay, now we have the claim that's arguable and the reasons. Pesticides endanger the lives of farm workers. So that's already starting to develop a thesis that has an arguable point, but also leads us to where the essay will focus its efforts and focus its kind of information and examination, right? So this has developed a focus for areas for further development. You'll not only need evidence to illustrate the causation, but also can explore underlying assumptions, like the idea, for instance, that farm workers have a right to a safe working environment. I'm sure many of us would not argue that, but it does allow you to get at those underlying assumptions that actually Savini talks about when talking about posing fruitful questions. Thus, here are some tips for developing an effective thesis. Ask yourself questions. Ask yourself questions of so what and who cares. Next week in chapter 7 of They Say I Say, we'll have these defined. But essentially, this is again identifying stakeholders, identifying the impact of your argument to see who it affects. Again, we had the farm workers in the previous example. That would be the who cares of this, right? Who might think differently? This will allow you to consider possible naysayers that you might plant into your argument. Again, as talked about in Chapter 6 this week of Grafenbergstein's They Say I Say. Also, be specific, right? Delimit your topic and argument so that you can focus on specific examples and ideas, right? Delimiting means kind of identifying not only what your essay is about, but what it's not about. The previous example about pesticides and farm workers, let's say, is not about the health of the consumer of, let's say, a farm product at the end of the cycle there, right? It's not, let's say, about pesticides or GMOs or things like that, right? It's more about the farm workers. So it's not about those things, it's about this. And it allows you to focus on very particular examples and very specific and complex ideas. Also be guided by your evidence, right? This is why I really have emphasized that we do the research first and then we think about thesis, right? Where does your evidence lead you? What have you found in the annotated bibliography that kind of guides you to a particular point, right? What sources provide different ways of examining the subject and how does the evidence connect? And again, that's a lot of what you'll be doing in the outline is identifying how your pieces of information in your sources connect. What limitations exist in other writers' works or what gaps exist in the conversation? So you can look to that evidence to find ways of developing the areas of focus for your thesis. Also consider nuances. You're not working to develop an absolute answer, right? So there can be complexity. There can be, well, this is true in this case, but not in all cases, right? You're not trying to answer the question. You're trying to add new ways of thinking to the conversation. So qualifiers like frequently, likely, many, most, recently, etc. are probably valuable tools here. That you're not giving a definitive, this will work in all situations, but in the situation you're looking at, maybe this is the case. So the final question I want to answer is, what is it that makes a thesis statement ambitious? Again, if you look to the evaluation criteria for the Writing Studies program, you'll see that in the A category, it talks about an ambitious thesis in that thesis and argument section, and even things like organization, that it's following from an ambitious thesis, right? So here's a sample. Wilderness camping poses many challenges. We'll probably agree this is not the most ambitious thesis. Okay, sure. You camp in the wilderness, it's going to have many challenges. Most of us are going to agree with this, right? This only requires stringing together summaries on the challenges posed, right? We can almost hear what this essay sounds like. It's a list of the challenges that would follow in wilderness camping, right? And it's not going to really kind of get into details or nuances here. So here's a revision. Let's try this. Like holding a mirror to your personality, wilderness camping reflects the person you are, for better and worse. Okay, there's a little more nuance here. There's a little more interest, It does connect some previously unconnected elements, like wilderness camping and self-reflection, but it may still feel kind of a bit worn and obvious a connection. I think that, there are numerous books written about someone finding themselves in the wilderness, or numerous things that we've probably read in fiction and nonfiction about that connection. So it doesn't feel maybe new. It feels kind of a fairly well-worn trail, no pun intended here, right? So it's better, it's more complex, it's more nuanced, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel new and fresh. Here's another one. Wilderness camping teaches that we must preserve what is brutal in nature, even if we must sacrifice public safety to do so. Okay, and a definition for ambition in a thesis is that an ambitious thesis connects previously unrelated elements by creating a contrast or an apparent contradiction, often signaled with words like although or even if. So here we have something about, we have to preserve brutal elements of nature in camping, even if it's not safe, right? That feels kind of more ambitious. So that the emphasis here is on connecting previously unrelated elements in a thesis, making new connections, finding new ways of thinking about something through a particularly new lens is kind of the definition of ambitious here. Sometimes that creates a contrast, or sometimes that just gives new insight by connecting those previously unrelated elements. So that's the really key phrase here to remember in identifying what's ambitious within a thesis statement. Again, with an ambitious thesis, the writer reaches for a broader, more complex, and if executed well, more important discussion. The ambitious thesis shows a writer is willing to take intellectual risks. So, let me know if you have any questions about this entry in the vlog. Remember that you have a reading quiz due by Friday, as well as, of course, our deadlines for discussions. And process assignment number 3 is due by 11:59 p.m. on Monday the 17th. I look forward to reading your work and interacting with you this week, and have a fantastic one.